Welcome back to the Fretboard Journal Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Verlinde. That's John Rauhaus playing in the background. Apologies that it took me a little extra long to get this episode out. Thank you for all the incredible emails regarding the Ella Feingold episode that we just put out. Between that and Jim D'Addario on the cover of the Fretboard Journal, I've gotten more compliments than I've probably had in years putting out the Fretboard Journal, and I just want you to all feel like you're always welcome to reach out to me, especially during these crazy times. Podcast at fretboardjournal.com is how you can reach out to me. I love getting letters from you all. I love hearing about what you like or maybe what you didn't like. And I love hearing about how the podcast has changed your life. So please keep all of those coming. Now, I mentioned Jim D'Addario being on the cover of the Fretboard Journal. That is our 55th issue. That is mailing to everybody right now. And if you want to subscribe, you can join us at fretboardjournal.com. Jim is actually going to be on the podcast next week. And this week, I'm talking to one of our many Fretboard Journal contributors who is up to something interesting, which is pretty much every Fretboard Journal contributor. I'm talking to Cameron Knowler. He's got a new record coming out in April called CRK. The first single is out now. I will include a link in the show notes. Cameron is just one of the most interesting people I've been lucky enough to meet in the last couple of years. He's an incredible player. He's been an incredible, invaluable contributor to our magazine. He did the Jake Xerxes Fussell interview in our most recent issue. He interviewed Peter Rowan for us. He's got a story on a cool guitar store repair shop coming up in our forthcoming issue, and he'll be profiled himself in the Fretboard Journal. So I wanted to talk to him about this record that he's got, CRK, because it's super cool. I wanted to get it in on the ground floor to tell you all about it. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you enjoy our conversation. Cameron's really just a gem of a musician and human being and Fretboard Journal contributor. Speaking of gems, I want to thank our sponsors. They are Mike and Mike's Guitar Bar here in Seattle, Washington. Mike of Mike and Mike's Guitar Bar just wrote a piece on the Walkman for our 55th issue of the magazine. I know a lot of you have been loving that. Go online, go to MM Guitar Bar, tell them the Fretboard Journal sent you. Check out their incredible inventory of vintage acoustics, electrics, synths, you name it. And then also head on over to Peghead Nation, our other sponsor, and use the discount code FRETBOARD when you check out. Peghead Nation is one of these online instruction portals where you can learn about anything you want, from swing guitar to bluegrass to mandolin and all points in between. Some of my favorite instructors in the entire world are working for Peghead Nation, and if you use the discount code FRETBOARD, you get your first month free or $20 off an annual subscription. Stringjoy Strings is still offering you all a discount on your first order. They've got mandolin strings now, guitar strings, acoustic and electric. They've got banjo strings. They're covering all the instruments that we cover. So go support them, see what they're up to. They also do custom sets and all sorts of limited run things that the bigger brands just don't do. Stringjoy.com. A couple of quick announcements before I talk to Cameron. If anyone is in the Pacific Northwest on February 21st, we're going to be hosting our, 10th annual, 12th annual, 15th annual Vintage Instrument Workshop at Wintergrass. This takes place Friday morning. We've got an all-star lineup of bluegrass musicians who are going to put, a couple $1 million worth of instruments through their paces on the stage. I hope to see some of you there. We always try to film it and try to record it and share it on YouTube. You can see the old ones on YouTube, but there's nothing like being there in person, and I'd love to see some of you there. Our new book, The Luthier's Toolbox, is also out now. We're going to be talking to the compiler of that book very soon on this podcast. I'll include a link to that in the show notes. Last but not least, our Fretboard Summit for 2025. We're pulling out all the stops. It's my 20th year of publishing. I hope to see some of you in Chicago. Go to fretboardsummit.org, register. If you are a luthier who's been featured on this show, or just somebody I know, or somebody who should be exhibiting at the summit, drop me a line. I'll give you the information packet. I would love to hear from you. Again, podcast at fretboardjournal.com is how you can email me. Those are my big announcements. Here is Cameron Knowler, my dear friend, talking about his new record, CRK. Cameron, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
So we've featured your writing in the magazine, and we'll continue to do so. You did that amazing Peter Rowan story for us, and other things, and we've had you on the podcast, and we've had you at the Fretboard Summit. But you're about to drop this record. Is this officially your first like full length record?
Basically, yeah. It's one of those things where technically, no. I guess in 2021, I had a record of what were demos that got released. So not that I don't stand behind it, but this feels like the first official one. It's a studio record, which doesn't necessarily mean that makes it your first official record. However, yeah, as something that comes out as it was intended to. So in that way, yes.
Your music is all over the map. We've talked about your music taste before. What were you going for with this record? Because I think most people, it's like, oh, I'm going to make an acoustic guitar record or whatever. And then it's just acoustic guitar. This has drums. There's some pedal steel. There's some like spoken word. Like this runs the gamut. So what was the vision for this record? Like, let's go there.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm going to give the short answer, which is basically like a Sam Shepard book meets like a Terry Allen style conceptual record, but conceptual more in terms of timbre as opposed to form or narrative, because it's a regional record. And in that way, it has, I think, stricter aims, if you will, but basically a narrative driven record with a survey of approaches, and trying to fit things under one circus big top sort of tent that I feel like pulls from the American canon. Similarly, I guess the other thing I would say is like one of my favorite kind of, I don't want to call him a regionalist, but someone who was speaking through a regional lens is the great classical guitar player Franz Casillas, who released records in the 50s with Smithsonian Folkways, and just the austerity of that record, or like a Bruce Langhorne style kind of cinematic record, just something that tells a narrative that doesn't try to lean or kind of dig too far into the American solely guitar canon.
You've just dropped a whole bunch of interesting names, and we could talk about that in depth, but let's fixate on the regional record thing. So what region are we talking about? I think a lot of our listeners know you did that incredible book, Guitars Have Feelings Too, which covered a lot of like old time music style, but what region are we talking about?
Thanks. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, so the Guitars Have Feelings Too kind of is the region of like Northwest Georgia, and some Galax, just kind of more progressive traditional guitar approaches. This is regional in terms of where I'm from, which is Yuma, Arizona, and it's right on the border of California and Mexico, right near Winter Haven, California, right on the Colorado River there.
Okay. And did it originate with, because it almost feels like a soundtrack to, just at first listen. Did it originate with one song that then sort of segued everything else, or how did this come to be?
Yeah, and I appreciate that I'm glad that the cinematic aspect came through. I think that's really what I'm going for, in terms of just kind of a wider panorama of sounds and kind of accustoming yourself to, the unexpected throughout the track list. But in terms of how it came together, it was made over such a long period of time that I had the luxury of organizing weirdness as it came out, just trying to see, just because whenever I sit down to write in a concentrated way or wasn't writing in a concentrated way, so many different things would come out. And so it's almost like it was rewritten so many times that it's hard to tell really. I mean, some of it was necessity. Like I need a tune that has this pacing. I need something in the key, this key or whatever, kind of trying to kind of pace it that way where, oh, maybe it goes up a fourth or whatever. And then the original intention kind of all went out the window, but basically just trying to organize things where, some songs would come out on a certain guitar and a certain feel, and then it ends up working somewhere else. But yeah, I would say the bulk of it started from three tunes that I feel like were jumping off points, and then those three tunes led me into some different territory that I didn't really expect to be in, I guess.
I don't want to intimidate people. There's beautiful acoustic guitar playing on this record, and people should definitely like gravitate towards it for that, at least at first. Was there one guitar that was the foundation for this record? I know you and I have talked about everything from like Vintage Martins to Ovations over the years. So I know
right.
I know you have the full palette.
Yeah, it's like John Waters. There's like good bad taste and bad good taste. I make the argument that fiddles and banjos are good bad and bad good, but guitars are often like good good or bad bad. So I try to find things that fit in between, and sometimes it's a traditional guitar that's supposed to be traditionally good, but it has 7,000 cracks and it needs a neck reset, so it's kind of bad, and then just leave it in that territory.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, I admittedly didn't really fall into just getting different instruments until like, I don't know, 2021, late 2021. I got a guitar that I bought it from my friend Sean at Stay Gold Guitars in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and then ended up selling it and then buying it back. And that's like basically a 1930 or 1932 Washburn 5238. It's just like a 000 sized guitar with gold filigree, and it's technically a 5234, but some of them got branded 5238. So yeah, it's like a laminated Brazilian rosewood back. And yeah, there's something about that guitar, like the first single Felicity, it was recorded on that guitar. And yeah. And
you bought it, sold it, and then bought it back? Is that what you said?
I did. Yeah.
Okay. So there's a little love-hate going on here.
well, so so basically I bought it and I thought to myself, if I ever meet Norman Blake, he's going to want this guitar.
Oh.
And then whenever I went down to go see Norman in 2022, and he wanted the guitar, and I went back to Los Angeles and we were talking, and he was like, well, if you think about selling that guitar, he was like, it's an oddball. It's something that I've never had before. I'd like to get it. So I said, well, I don't want to sell it, but if anybody would, I'd sell it to anybody but you. So we ended up trading guitars. And then through the grapevine, Norman's son commented on one of my YouTube videos, not knowing that I knew his dad, and said, oh, I know that El Century of Progress guitar. My dad played one of those. I'm, Lee Blake. And got in touch with him. And he said, oh, my dad's studying about selling that old Washburn of yours. So then called him, and I got it. And it was at Robert Chuckro's house where he was doing repairs out of. And sadly, he passed away last month or a couple months ago. But I picked the guitar up from Chuckro, also known as St. Elmo Slim, back in May of 24. So it was great to get it back. But yeah, I've always loved that guitar, but I had to let it go for the Gibson Century of Progress.
Wow. Okay. St. Elmo Slim. Like, you're throwing all these names at me. It's amazing. Folks will have to go crazy on the Googling to figure all this out. Besides the Washburn, what else was on this record that really got played a lot?
Yeah. The Century got played on a track. Mm-hmm. The Washburn got played on a track. My old J35, another beat up old guitar, 1937 J35, and 1926 217, which, if I understand correctly, is the Gillian Welch Miss Ohio guitar. and or not that exact one, but that model. And Jimmy Rogers had one in the mid-20s. Trying to think of what else. The yeah, that and an Oscar, a mid-20s Oscar Schmidt Grand Auditorium that I also got at Stay Gold. Those are kind of the mainstays throughout the record.
And Fretboard Journal readers will read about Stay Gold, thanks to you, in a future issue. When you were bringing in players for this, it sounds like this record was in the works for a while. Was there one like recording session where everybody came in, or was this done over the course of a long period?
It was done over the course of a long period. Basically, moving from Houston to Los Angeles, moving from Los Angeles to Nashville within the span of 3 years, which is crazy to think about. And none of that was intentional. It just moving to LA was very intentional, but everything after that was just like things just happened. So I recorded with Jen Condos and Jay Bellerose at their place in Los Angeles. And then I recorded with Sean Sullivan at the Tractor Shed in Nashville, or it's outside of Nashville and in Goodlettsville, or as Jordan Tice likes to call it, Badlettsville, but lovingly, of course. But yeah, if I understand correctly, used to be Grandpa Jones's Tractor Shed. So we got some great sounds in there. My friend Ian Doer recorded me a bit at his all analog studio in Highland Park, LA, called Love Magnet. And then my friend Rich overdubbed, and I think that was the only overdub on the record was Rich's pedal steel, and I think he was doing that from Massachusetts.
Rich Hinman, who's been on our Steel podcast and rocked everybody's world at the last Fretboard Summit.
The best.
Yeah.
Simply the best.
Did you coach or instruct these players for like the vibe you were going after? Because, you know, you're probably the only one of the whole group who grew up or lived in Yuma.
Yeah, honestly, no. I really appreciate you bringing that up, because I think back on that, and that's like almost the most, like, for lack of a better term, psychedelic part of it was just that, like, when the first single is called Felicity, and it was first take, the first time I'd ever played with Jay Bellerose, which is the scariest thing. I mean, we were in a house, we were each in separate rooms, hearing his drums on 7 different mics in my cans, and I completely blacked out. And then it was the first take, and he was like, "That felt great." And Jen kindly said it sounded like that we had been playing together for a while. And the first thing he thought of was Sandy Bull, which, if people aren't familiar with Sandy Bull, amazing guitar player. And he pulled out one of the LPs, and he's like, that was immediately where I went in my mind. It was just a dusty sound. And it's not like I was wearing like a Yuma shirt or, or anything like that. Or, and then everything on top of that, I think there's something about recording imperfect, dry acoustic guitars, which is the center of this record. Mm-hmm. There's nothing fetishistic or crazy about any of these guitars. I mean, I love dry guitars, and I as kind of unfounded as that sounds, I mean, I really didn't give them any instruction, but I think I mean, I was talking to Jake Fussell about this in the most recent piece in the newest Fretboard, about just working with musicians that understand where this music comes from, like the syntax of rhythm. Like if you're playing alternating thumb guitar with an upright bass player, it's rendered useless unless someone really knows how to work around that, because it's basically already covered. Mm-hmm. So yes, feel super lucky to work with people that understand music so broadly, because it's a hard thing to ask somebody. But yeah, in terms of like the kind of desert aesthetic, It was totally natural.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite, like, all-time dry guitar record?
Yeah. I'm just trying to think of what that is. I mean, I immediately go to like Fahey,
Yeah.
Days Gone By, like, or like an impressions of Susan, or like Norman, like Spanish Fandango. It's a D28, but it just sold on the market, but it's a 1950 D28, straight braced. Um, Robert Bolin, I think, gravitates towards dry guitars. Like hearing a YouTube video of him playing like a Larson
Yeah.
jumbo. It's like, to me, that's like, yeah,
And you
Bolin
got
on
him
a.
on the record.
I did, yeah. That was I met him very organically, and he was kind enough to say, "Yeah, we'll work on something." So yeah, we did a tune called "Bullet the Wagon," and he actually played piano on Sundust, which I guess that's his original instrument. The crazy thing is he's played fiddle with Bill Monroe and guitar with the Osborne. I mean, everybody. And yeah, and he his first instrument was classical piano.
Yeah.
So that was a highlight for sure.
Do you have plans to play this record live?
I don't. I don't. I mean, if I were playing a show like with the various ensemble formats, yeah, I wouldn't know where to begin. I feel like yes, but I'd have to. It would have to be just like the record itself, piecemeal. When I'm in LA, I could do a show with like,
Yeah.
a drum, Jay, or if he would ever do it, but or if I were somewhere on the East Coast, if Rich would consider doing it. But yeah, I don't. It would be a hard thing to do.
Yeah. And the record comes out what day?
April 4th.
April 4th.
Yeah.
And I mentioned your other guitar book. You're not done writing. I mean, in addition to writing for the Fretboard Journal, you've got another. Do you want to talk about the next book?
That'd be awesome.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. The next book is, well, there's two, but I can't talk about one.
Okay.
But it will happen. It's just a longer happening. The more immediate happening is something I am allowed to talk about, which is a book about Riley Puckett, who I go so far as to say was more so the father of country music than Jimmy Rogers. And I really do mean that. And so it's a book about his significance. It's how many songs? There's probably like 70 transcriptions, but then there's a biography about him. Very underwritten person. And yeah, there's a history that kind of borrows from a couple other folklorists throughout time, Norm Cohen and Charles Wolfe and Tony Russell. Tony Russell is still writing and one of my absolute favorites. But yeah, it leans heavily on their research done in the late 60s and 70s. And yeah, I was lucky enough to get in touch with Puckett's grandson, who kind of relays his mom's words, who's Riley's daughter. And so, yeah, with all that and kind of never before seen photographs from them, it should be a cool project. And I also, through two randomly organized interviews from musicians, I believe cracked the code on what Riley was doing with his right hand, which is a totally unorthodox right hand approach, as well as a different tuning altogether, which made me rethink all the transcriptions that I had done over the 3 years leading up to writing that technical portion of the book.
Wow. So are you in the midst of rewriting it, or you're going with it?
I rewrote it. I rewrote
it.
Thankfully, I never have to think about, I mean, of course, I mean, if there's subsequent editions, but for now, my brain is in the place of I cannot think about this anymore.
Is this slated to be a 2025 project?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's going to go to print, I think, in a couple months, but may push that back just because of the craziness with the record and stuff like that. But yeah, definitely 2025.
And I always presume everybody knows everything that we talk about on this podcast, which I shouldn't. But if you had to give somebody the elevator pitch as to why Riley Puckett is like the true father of country music, lay it on me. 2 sentences.
So the top seller in the late 20s, early 30s was Vernon Dalhart. And Riley was second only to him in record sales. He had 7 Model Ts with his name printed right on the side. He predated Jimmy Rogers yodeling by 3 years. And a lot of Jimmy's first sides were tunes that Puckett had done. And I mean, there's a lot of, Slim Bryant, who was an Atlanta guitar player who played with Puckett in the original iteration of their string band, the Skill Lickers, went on to record with Jimmy Rogers during his Camden, New Jersey sessions in 1932. And there's a really cool quote by Clayton McMitchen, who was the fiddler, one of the fiddlers in the Skill Lickers, who said, relayed that a record scout for Columbia, Bill Evans at the time, turned down a budding Jimmy Rogers saying, we already have a Riley Puckett. But mainly if you really want to go empirical, which I don't tend to do, his record sales were at the top, basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
And he has some crazy guitar technique and tuning that you're about to unleash onto the world again.
Yeah. Yeah.
As is clear to everybody who's made it this far, like, you are a total music historian. Can you talk a little bit about your day job?
Yeah. Well, so this kind of happened randomly, but not really randomly, because I was doing a master's degree in archives, but recently, I guess within the last however many months, I started working with the Grand Ole Opry on their photo collection. So mainly 2 collections, one by Les Leverett and one by Jim McGuire. And in their own rights, between their 2 bodies of work, they've covered so many people, from, David Bromberg to like Alan Jackson. And they're 2 amazing archive repositories that, the Opry being, very much for-profit, non-museum oriented company, with a history of being, tied to a life insurance company and now a hospitality company. It's a cool way of kind of existing in 2 worlds, with very much different motivations. But somehow these wonderful photos have landed right in the middle of it. But then the other thing is maintaining the instrument collection, or really preserving the instrument collection, which is largely related to the Roy Acuff instrument collection that George Gruen did a book on with, I believe, Ranger Doug in the mid 70s. So if anybody wants to go buy that book on eBay, it's cheap and it's a really great book. And that's basically the collection we're looking at.
And this sounds like the dream job of almost everybody hearing this podcast. Like, I get to look at old photos and like touch old guitars. Is that basically what you're doing?
Yeah, straight. Yeah, I'm very, very, very fortunate. And that everybody's amazing to work with. And I get to continue great relationships with people like Joe Glazer, who helps us assess things, as well as everybody else at his shop. And get to have cool conversations with people about family members who may have passed away and they're trying to preserve their legacy, or newer artists who are getting things started, who really, really care about the history of the Opry. And no matter where you kind of land in terms of your taste in country music, the Opry's been through all of it, basically. So it's cool to sit with that history, and help people kind of translate it.
Just how many instruments are we talking about?
Well, there were the floods in 2010, but there's a lot. There's a lot of instruments. We had friend of FBJ, Deke Dickerson, down, who's working on a new project. I don't know if I could talk about what it is, but he was in there to look at some guitars, and there were a couple of pieces I think that surprised him a bit, and he's seen everything, and so that was cool to hear. But yeah, we have some really cool stuff, like Asher Sizemore's old Jumbo Larson, which is very similar to the one Dylan had as his upstate New York guitar with the weird bridge, also a maple backed Jumbo, and an HG22 that was custom made for Jimmy Rogers as a backup to his 0045 with the thanks printed on the back. And it has EAD GBE inlaid at the 12th fret. That's a personal favorite.
Yeah. I mean, this sounds like the greatest job imaginable. Like, you get your hands on guitars that just never surface anywhere. Well,
thanks. Yeah, no, it's definitely a Fretboard Journal job or oriented job. I think, yeah, it's cool that it exists and that people are open to why, or just the perspective of those two worlds. Yeah, I guess because in grad school, I specialized in photo archivy, but as I understood, there's no jobs as a photo archivist except this one somehow that also has instruments tied. So I'm very, very lucky to have it.
And the Grand Ole Opry, which is not to be confused with the Country Music Hall of Fame, also in Nashville for us who don't live in the 615 area code. Do they have plans to showcase these instruments and like have them on display in some capacity, or is it just all digitizing, getting photos, getting the backstory?
That's a great question. Yeah, they do. I mean, like, there's various exhibits that happen on a very much smaller scale than the Hall of Fame, which the Hall of Fame, from what I understand, generates the majority of the revenue through ticket sales and people visiting. So in that way, their economy, if you will, is based on that. Ours is very much like if someone has a specific ask, but like, for example, if an artist wants to play Merle Haggard's like 0045, we need to get where my job is to have them ready to do that. And so I owe that to Glazer's team of people, because that's what they've been doing for us. But yeah, I mean, not really like a proper display in like an exhibit of like, here's some pioneering instruments, but hopefully, yeah. I mean, for example, like I guess it's a 56 D28 that Johnny Cash wrote Walk the Line on is being displayed at the Ryman, for example, right now, where people can enjoy it. But yeah, kind of very, very much truncated as opposed to the Hall of Fame in that way.
Man, Nashville, you guys, it's an embarrassment of riches. What else? I mean, what else can you tell us about the Nashville guitar scene for those of us who primarily exist off of like the random updates from David Rawlings or a Tom Bukovac video? Like, what's going on over there?
Oh yeah. The Nashville guitar, well, we were talking a little bit about this before. Just it's a shell shock for sure. I think like the amount of heavy hitter, I mean, there's heavy hitters all over. I mean, regional musicians all over the world that are heavy hitters, but like heavy hitters with a sweet tooth for old crazy guitars are just like, they're here basically. And I think it's cool because they have such a creative life. Everyone knows Vince Gill, making amazing music with these guitars. So, I mean, there's no place like that. I mean, living in LA, LA's, one of my favorite places on earth, but it doesn't have that aspect to it, which is a blessing and a curse. I mean, because I think a lot of people take it too far, in my own opinion, and I'm guilty of that myself, just taking it way too far and then thinking about what they have more so than just writing a new idea. So yeah, it's kind of it's dangerous, I guess my bank account would safely say, is that it's like you gotta be careful. Because I started out, I just had like a 0018 from the 50s that I got for like $1,200 when I was like 20. And not that I have crazy stuff now, but I have more than that.
Yeah. Well, you've jumped into the deep end for sure.
Yeah, well, this is the place to do it. I mean, have you spent time here before? Have you surveyed it?
In very short spells. So, I mean, that was going to be my follow-up question was if somebody were to go to Nashville in 2025, like, are there one or two venues where you are guaranteed to see like the greatest guitar playing of your life?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, like Fats Kaplan plays out like at places like the Five Spot. I mean, and the Ryman is always. It's the Ryman is amazing, and I've never had a bad experience there. The Grand Ole Opry isn't for everybody, but it's very much like it has modest. I feel like it's very in your face, like I'm the Grand Ole Opry, and it's yeah, you kind of have to go there and just check it out, even if you see Steve Earle play two songs. It's cool to it's cool to see that still happening. But yeah, I mean yeah, there's a lot of stuff, but there's little places around. There's like a little place called Vinyl Tap where I've played some good shows and it's always fun. And the Blue Room at Third Man Records, I've always had. I saw Blake Mills there and it was amazing, and as well as other people. So there's but we need more listening rooms like Los Angeles. We need more record stores that just put on not even weirdo shows, but just like shows. I mean, we have the Basement, but sometimes it's hard to just book a casual show there and bring out 50 people and have fun.
Interesting. I wouldn't have thought of that. I would have thought there would have been venues of every stripe on every corner.
Me too, honestly. Yeah, we could use like a little bit of LA's energy in the small venue department.
What's the energy without outing anybody or giving out classified information? What is the vibe in the high end guitar collecting world of Nashville right now? Is everyone kind of just like, I'm happy with my collection, maybe I should get rid of a few pieces? Are people still acquiring stuff? Like, what's your sense?
I think that it depends. Like musicians or like not, or like both working musicians and people who just appreciate them. And I think that there's a lot of acquiring happening. Really? I think it always, I think so. I mean, just to see what Carters, like their image, like go in there every month or something. And I'm just like, I don't think I recognize anything in here that I was here last time, which is amazing for them. And I think a lot of their sales have to be people in Nashville, but I could be totally wrong about that. But that's the sense that I get. So I don't think people are over it yet.
Okay. That's great to hear. Any other projects we should talk about? You're always up to something.
Well, I mean, I appreciate. I mean, look who's talking. Seriously, there's some writing for the magazine that I'm really excited about. Projects kind of surfacing, which I'm really thankful to be doing. Just kind of chugging along. Kind of developing another solo record that is more of just me playing guitar. That's it. Just playing guitar in my living room on an old tape machine.
I was going to ask, having spent years honing in this sort of regional record based around the Southwest, did that whole process get it out of your system, or is it going to be in every record going forward? So maybe you purged a little bit?
I did. I did. And I like it. I think it's always going to be there. I think it's like, yeah, without going too far afield, like if people don't know, Yuma was the first place in Arizona territory to get the railroad. And so Southern Pacific builds a bridge across the Colorado River where the 49ers were coming through on a ferry. I mean, like Cormac McCarthy's The Crossing is based on this war that erupts there. And it's crazy. I almost think of like, maybe I'm misremembering, like that Simpsons movie where there's a dome built or like a snow globe in a tiny little area in this border town. It's like the most picturesque, Western town that's very much like not that cinematically exploited. Like there's some really iconic Dorothea Lange photos that were taken there. And there's the iconic movie 3:10 to Yuma, which doesn't really give a sense of it. So yeah, I've just kind of been obsessing over not only the material history, but also just oral histories of people on local Facebook groups that say, oh, my grandfather or great grandfather's buried in an unmarked grave, and he was the first person on this really successful mine, and then he got run out. So that is totally endless. And so like, I feel like I owe it to that place to represent it. So like the next record, like all the song titles are Yuma all over again. So I thought I purged it, but I think it might be even worse. I'm afraid to admit.
I mean, it's an interesting thought experiment. We probably all could make a guitar album about wherever we all grew up. Yuma is particularly picturesque and historic, but I mean, we all got this going through our veins.
Totally. I mean, Flannery O'Connor said that by the time you're 15, you have enough material to write for the rest of your life. And my friend Alec Wilkinson feels the same way about writing. And I think, I think there's something, especially at least for me right now, with how I feel living in the United States. It's like there's something amazing about just claiming, where you're from and just holding on to that as, as cliche or whatever as that sounds like that. This is where I was born. I mean, I kind of like left there and, under not the best of circumstances, but like coming back to it, it's like, just making sandcastles out of it. And it feels naive and stupid and like endless. And I love that.
It's awesome. It's totally awesome. The record is called CRK. It's on Bandcamp. It's everywhere. I love it. I mean, it's so cool to hear a record so different. I mean, it does sound, when you mentioned Terry Allen, it's got the there was that period of time when Cooder and Terry Allen and a bunch of musicians were doing this sort of like more grandiose records that just nobody does now. And you did it.
Thank you. Well, that's super nice. I appreciate that. And I gotta, and I mean, it goes without saying that Norman Blake and Cooder, and Terry, I mean, Rise Records, Chavez Ravine, and I always forget the name of the record, John Lee Hooker Blues or John Lee Hooker for President or whatever. There's a song about Yuma on that record, which I was pleased to find out about. It has the yellow record, and it's like, I don't know, 2011 or something like that. But that and Chavez Ravine, I mean, can't live without those records.
Totally. I love it. Well, thank you, Cameron.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure and an honor.
All right. That was Cameron Knowler. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope I see some of you at Wintergrass here in the greater Seattle area on February 21st. I'm running a marathon on Saturday, so send me good thoughts and I'll give you the full recap next week.